I always considered myself a 2D artist. Anything 3D kinda scared me. I was never a big fan of the ultra realistic, smooth aspect that a lot of 3D art have. And don't get me wrong, I know a lot of cool stuff can be done in 3D. Spider-Verse is a big example of that. And I do believe that in recent years, there's been a lot of nice stylistic choices on 3D productions. But even that always seemed way too complex and technical for my small little brain. UV mapping, node veils, rigging. And hey, I'm a UPA girly. The art I like to make relates a lot to the 50s flat graphic style that kinda had a comeback in the late 90s and early 2000s as well. Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, and many other cartoons that I grew up watching. I also think that there is a whimsicality and zestiness that only a 2D doodle can offer. And this is why I never delved too much into the 3D realm until I saw this. This is a piece made by the artist Deduce, and it has everything I love. Simple, flat shapes and a doodle-esque style, but with 3D camera movements, and it was all made in Blender. Blender, you know, that 3D software, the free counterpart to Maya. Well, that's what I thought Blender was until I discovered this, and this, and this. And if you go to his Instagram account, you're gonna see videos of him drawing 2D lines in Blender. And of course, after having my whole perspective on 3D art changed drastically, I desperately wanted to make 2.5D art. See, I don't want to only to put some 2D inspired texture on my 3D scene. I want to be able to draw two-dimensional lines within a 3D environment and to do a perfect merge of both approaches. And that's what I did. And I'm gonna show you how I did it. And no, this is not a step-by-step tutorial video. This is just a video of me sharing with you the process of making a 2.5D scene for the first time. But first, we need to start with one of my favorite parts. This was a big challenge to me. I had never done anything like this before. I have never even navigated on a 3D software properly, and I didn't even know where to start. All I knew was Grease Pencil. Grease Pencil is a Blender tool that makes it possible for you to draw two-dimensional lines within the software. And something was telling me that this was a good start point. So I watched as many tutorials I could find on YouTube about Grease Pencil, and my holy grail was Dedu's YouTube videos. He has great Grease Pencil tutorials that saved me. I really do recommend you checking his stuff out because he is a Blender wizard. Another thing that I knew was that I didn't want it to make everything on Grease Pencil. As I mentioned before, I wanted to do a perfect merge of both 2D and 3D, and with that I could not escape 3D modeling, for example. So I also watched as much basic 3D Blender tutorials as I could. Not a donut one though. If you ever try to learn 3D on your own, especially Blender, you know which tutorial I'm talking about. And the donut tutorial was made by a really skilled 3D artist for other 3D artists. If you are a 2D artist that never touched a 3D software in your life, do not start with the donut tutorial. You're going to get scared and you're going to give up. A really good alternative for people that get easily traumatized by technical stuff like me is the ramen bowl tutorial by Azusa Toho. She shows a lot of basic tools and techniques for 3D modeling and shading without it being too much information. So after having studied enough basics, I needed to decide what was my scene going to be about. As I mentioned previously, I really like the flat, simple but graphic style of UPA and early 2000s cartoons. So I wanted to do something like that. I wanted to do something funky and funny. I decided on a bathroom, a very pink and messy bathroom. And in the middle of the chaotic bathroom, there's a girl, a young woman in her early 20s, getting ready for a night out. Hence the wine bottle indicating pre-drinking, pair of shoes on the floor left by her for trying out different outfits, and a lot of makeup and hair products all over. I did some concept art and I also decided which objects would be made in 3D and which ones would be hand-drawn using grease pencil. I also decided to animate my character in full 2D hand-drawn animation because I don't fuck with 3D rigging. And I also like 2D hand-drawn animation better. And this part is really important. I discovered that this is not a type of project that you can figure it out as you go, especially because there's a substantial technical part to it. So you really need to study your tools, understand their restrictions, and work accordingly. For example, I chose the simple but eye-catching UPA style not only because I like it, but also because I was trying to compensate for the fact that I wasn't going to do elaborated textures and rendering on my scene. After all, I was already learning a lot of new stuff here, so I wanted to keep this project challenging but not overwhelming to the point where I would just give up in the middle of it. So yeah, every time you're learning something new, keep it simple, keep it doable. For my scene to have the perfect 2.5D look to it, I couldn't fully avoid 3D modeling, so I decided to keep it to the bare minimum but strategically placed. I figured that if I modeled the base of my bathroom along with the furniture like the toilet, sink, I could explore the details and all the other smaller objects in the scene with grease pencil. It would also make it possible for me to move my camera around the bathroom structure, giving my scene a depth that only a 3D camera movement can offer. Then I started modeling following basic YouTube tutorials, and it's not the best modeling ever. Yeah, there's that. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm going to hide this monstrosity with a shower curtain anyways. You can clearly see that I am not a pro at 3D modeling. The mesh was worse. Go for me. The mesh was way worse. What I am showing you right now is the better version of it. The first version of this bathroom was well, let's say that the amount of polygons I had on this file was obscene. Shout out to my friend Gabriel Barral for helping me figure out my modeling, because that was ridiculous. Very demure, my freshly modeled bathroom, but how the hell do I make this look 2D? That's the real question here, right? Because after all, I want this to look like this. Thank God there's a thing called toon shader. Every object that you create on a 3D scene has a material attached to them, and this material is what is going to dictate how the software renders your object. To put it simply, this grayish plain look is the standard material that Blender links to every new 3D object you create. And if we want to change the look of our objects, we need to change the materials. Now, trigger warning. Node view. I debated with myself whether or not I should make this video a tutorial, but I figured that it was going to be a really long one if I did so. If you want, I can make another video with a more tutorial approach to it, but there are already a lot of toon shader tutorials available on YouTube. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna put in the description all the links for the tutorials I used to make this project. So basically, in the node view, you can create a material that people call toon shader. It gives your 3D objects flat colors, and you can control a lot of the aspects of this material. And I know this might look scary on a first glance, but once you learn the basics, it gets easier, I promise. Go for me, this is the simpler way to do it. There are worse things out there. So my scene with the toon shading looks like this. You can see that even though these are 3D objects, they still have a flatter look to them, which is perfect because once I start putting my 2D objects on my scene, they won't look out of place. But there's one more step that really ties everything up. In Blender, you can give your 3D objects a 2D outline. And there are many ways to do it, actually, which can be very overwhelming. The first one I tried was something called freestyle. Freestyle is a rendering option where the software draws an outline on your 3D objects once you render them. And this is why I don't like it, because you are not able to see the outlines in your project until you render it. So I find it to be quite frustrating having to constantly render an image of my project to check if the outlines were okay and to see how they were reacting with the other objects I was adding to my scene. And the freestyle turned out to be very temperamental with the grease pencils, so I just decided to do a different approach. We finally got to the star of the show, the groundbreaking tool that made this project possible in just one software. You can do line art, you can draw details on your 3D objects, you can draw a full 2D object, you can do hand-drawn animation, you can do storyboard, and all that with a system of layers, different brush settings, and standard drawing software tools like layer blending modes, onion skin, stabilizer, and many more. Honestly, you can do a full 2D project on Blender. You don't even have to use its 3D tools. You can treat Blender as a software for 2D animation as well. And as I mentioned before, the freestyle outlines weren't working the way I wanted, so I tried the grease pencil approach. One of the grease pencil features creates a 2D outline on your 3D objects with just one click, and that outline can be personalized. You can change the thickness, the color, the texture. You can also add modifiers to that outline and make it animated. The only problem with that approach is that the outline is created based on your camera view. So if you start moving the camera around too much in your scene, that outline starts falling apart. But for me personally, that wasn't an issue because I wasn't planning on having complex 3D camera movements in my project anyways. And here you can see how my scene looked so far. Actually, this is already the most recent file with the final lighting. I have some pictures of how it looked like before I got to fix the lighting. Now this is what I consider to be one of the most fun parts, adding the grease pencil objects. There's a lot of grease pencil objects in the scene because I wanted all the smaller items to be hand drawn and the bathroom to look chaotic and messy with stuff all around. Most of them were pretty simple to make, but others I had a hard time with, especially the blow dryer with its wire. Turns out it's a little puzzle to put these two-dimensional flat objects on a 3D scene. I had to cheat a lot with the perspective. Having a preview with a stationary camera on the side of my project helped me out incredibly. And as I mentioned, I wasn't planning on crazy camera work, so it didn't really matter if the scene looked hideous from a 19-degree rotation. This is really the downside of using grease pencil objects on a 3D scene because they are flat. And it produces a restriction to your camera movements, especially if you're not keen on drawing all the sides of your object, which can totally be made. So it really depends on how much work you want to put into the making of your 2D objects. And if you're going out of your way to make them look 3D, just, model something on 3D. My point is, if the 3D route starts getting more simple and you come up with very similar results in the end, I don't see the point of using grease pencil. I particularly use grease pencil on things I know cannot be done on 3D. Another thing I did was give some of the objects like the shower curtains and the wine bottle a cast shadow. You can actually do that by creating a solid 3D mesh of your grease pencil object and hiding it from view. So that way your grease pencil objects would react to the lighting in your scene similarly to a 3D object. There's a specific tutorial for that I'm gonna leave in the description. But since most of my objects were oddly positioned in the scene, I had to hand draw a lot of cast shadows. Which again, it wasn't an issue because since the style of my project was so graphic and so cartoony, I was able to get away with a lot of things that I wouldn't be able to if the style I choose was more 3D or realistic. So keep that in mind. Sometimes the style you choose for your projects can help you out, or sometimes they can really give you big headaches. One final thing was the details and some textures for the objects I modeled in 3D. I drew the tiles using grease pencil and I just positioned the grease pencil object in front of the wall and the floor. I know this could have been done differently, but that's a learning subject for another project. I wanted my character to look like a 2000s popular girl. She's tall, she's skinny, she has a scandalous fake tan, and a really damaged, almost white blonde bleach hair that is also very curly. And that's really important because in the scene, the girl is trying to straighten her hair and oh boy, it does not end up well. As I mentioned before, you can use Blender as a 2D animation software with a very nice timeline, layers, and onion skin. You only need to create a blank grease pencil object and cluster your whole animation there. From thumbnails to rough to clean to color. It was really good to isolate my animation so that I could better focus on it. There is the 2D animation window on Blender where it hides your 3D objects and creates this white background. So there weren't any drastic changes to the workflow I was used to for 2D animation. Of course, it's a new software, so you kind of need to locate yourself within the interface and learn where all the tools are. But apart from that, I did not notice any big changes from other 2D animation softwares like Harmony, for example. The only thing that really impacted me were the cutter tool and the transform tool. If you want to cut a part of your character and move it around or rotate or scale it, you need to use the edit mode. And that's when you get reminded that Blender is also a 3D software. So you need to be very cautious on how you relocate separated parts of your drawings. This does not happen if you want to transform your drawings as a whole. You can just use object mode to transform everything all together. But yeah, apart from that, the animation went pretty smoothly. It was the easiest part of all the project, actually. I thought I only needed to add the moonlight coming from the window and then 2 spotlights coming from the lamps beside the mirror and call it a day. But no, that's not how it works. I discovered that you actually have to put a lot of work into your lighting for your 3D scenes. Who'd have thought? No wonder why lighting is a whole ass department in productions. So it took me a long time to figure out my lighting. And I don't think I fully did. If you put your light source behind the grease pencil objects, it's not gonna light up the front. Duh. So when I put my light sources coming from the back window and the lamps, there were grease pencil objects further in the front, like the ones on top of the toilet seat, and they were dark as fuck. So yeah, I had to add many other lights, and I had to adjust the intensity of each one of them individually because I didn't want most of the objects in my scene to be in complete darkness, but I still wanted people to believe that the only light sources were the moonlight from outside the window and the 2 lamps on the wall. And I'm not sure if I fully achieved that. Anyways, something also tells me that I should have figured out my lighting earlier in the project, but it was also fairly easy to make my camera move. I already knew I wasn't going to do anything elaborated, so I basically created an invisible object in the middle of my scene and parented my camera to it so that I could rotate it around my structure. And I animated a very slight camera movement just for you to be able to see the 3D environment in action. I rotated my camera up into my grease pencil objects allowed. This is kind of interesting because even though the objects were 2-dimensional, they still allow a certain area of rotation that you can navigate in before you break perspective and your viewer realizes that this is actually just a flat plane. And I think this is where the magic of 2.5D comes from. Because yes, I cannot move my camera around freely as I would have be able to do if all my scene was 3D, but I can still move it in a way that I would not be able to do if all my scene was just flat planes. Guess which software I used to edit my project? I swear, this is not an ad. It could be though. After rendering my animation with my scene, I needed to add sound to it to make it more fun. So yeah, I used the video editing interface in Blender. And again, it was very easy and intuitive, like any other video editing software. I was able to include some audio files and render it a final time. And this is the final result. It took me 4 months to complete this project. But all things considered, I had a pretty shallow 3D knowledge at the start. The last time I had modeled anything was like 5 years ago, and it was really basic stuff. I had never even touched the node view, nor messed up with lighting and camera movements. And yet, I was able to deliver a very interesting looking final piece that I was proud of. It is very satisfactory knowing that I can do something like that I can learn a completely different artistic approach in a considerably short period of time. And the fact that I did it all using just one software and one file. Like, yeah, I used Procreate for my concept art, and I had multiple versions of the same file for safety reasons. But I didn't need to keep opening other softwares and to keep importing files from somewhere else and worrying about file compatibility and whatnot. And honestly, if I really wanted to, I could have done the visual development part on Blender as well. Anyways, let me know if you liked this 2.5D approach and if you would like to see more videos related to Blender or more tutorials on my channel. Just a reminder that I will leave all the tutorials I used for this project linked in the description of this video. And I do plan on bringing more videos related to my experiments on Blender. I am cooking a lot of interesting things at the moment, so stay tuned. I debated with myself whether or not I should make this video in English. After all, like 100% of my followers here at the moment are Brazilians. But since I moved to Canada, I got to know a lot of nice international artists. And I wanted to make this video accessible for the most people possible. That's why I decided to record it in English with Portuguese subtitles. I don't know if I will keep using only English on my videos for now on, or if I'll go back to Portuguese or do a little bit of both. I'm still thinking about that. Let me know in the comments what you think.